The question tonight is whether enough is being done when it comes to giving young people the political knowledge and skills necessary for democratic participation. Good evening and welcome to Situation Critical. I'm Jonas Mbambo, and my guests for this evening are Esther Shakela, a youth activist, and Panduleni Ngipandulwa, the NID Program Manager for Civic Education. Very good evening to you, Esther and Pandu, and thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, Jonas.
Good evening, Jonas. Thank you very much for having us.
Esther, let me perhaps start with you by asking the question, in a nutshell, what exactly is citizenship education, if you were just to break it down in its most simplest form?
Thank you very much for starting with ladies first. See, you're a gentleman, love what's going on there. I think really briefly, citizenship education is teaching learners and students about the fundamentals of democracy. It's about teaching them to participate in the democratic processes that are done within their country. It's about teaching them about the world around them. It's about teaching them to understand the environments that they find themselves in. It's about teaching them about non-discrimination, about tolerance, the ideals of nation building. I think in our context, it's about teaching students and learners, what does it mean to be a Namibian? What is the ideological precipice of Namibia, of Namibians, of the government, of the state? How do I make an invaluable contribution as a citizen in the Namibian context, and then also as a global citizen, seeing as, you know, we don't have borders anymore, we've become a borderless global community. So I think really briefly, citizenship education is about teaching about democracy, you know, the importance of voting, the importance of exercising your voice, your choice, what it really means to belong to a nation and what it means to be a building block in the building of that nation. Yeah.
Bandu, how would you describe the current state of citizenship education in Namibia?
So I work with various schools, that is government and private schools, and what I've come to realize is that there is civic education being taught in our schools, but the thing is it's not extensive, and it's only limited to learners that, for instance, in primary and secondary level that do social studies, history, developmental studies, and also on tertiary level in university, political studies, law. Yeah, those are the people that are exposed to this information. But as she rightfully said, it's important that all Namibian citizens, especially the youth, get access to this information as to how they can influence decision making, how they can participate in the development, socio-economic and political development of this country. So in a nutshell, civic education, it's mostly being taught in private schools. I've realized that from a younger age, the private schools equip their learners. They teach them about the three branches of government and the function of each. That's the executive, legislative, and the judicial, as well as the levels of government, the central, regional, and local, and as well as the role of citizens, where they fit in and how they can influence decision making at the end of the day. So yes, I think although it's being taught, it needs to be accessible to all learners and from a very young age.
When you say young, I remember when we were growing up, in our teens, many of us thought, politics was, it's an old people thing. No, politics has nothing to do with me. Then you start growing up, you go to university, you get a degree, and then you start looking for work, and you realize, well, I can't find a job. Why is this the case? Then you realize that, that kind of public office or the policies that are put in place are not in your favor, and that's the only time when you start taking politics seriously, because now it's affecting you on a personal level. Esther, what age did you make politics your business?
I think to first of all make reference to what you're speaking about is that Politics 101, and I'm a political science major graduate, Politics 101 teaches us that politics is ideally the question of who gets what, when, where, and then how. So politics is not only limited or confined to partisan politics to say I belong to a certain political party or things like that, but even in our offices there exists office politics, in the schools there's education politics, it's politics all over the place. So I think that it is often very inaccurate to say then that politics is something that we must only make reference to when we feel that it is able to influence us. And then that's where now we also locate the importance of citizenship education, because we must teach people, we must teach all citizens from the onset. We can start with baby steps in kindergarten, the national anthem, what does the coat of arms mean? When learners are learning how to draw, you're like, this is, the oryx, you probably only get to understand it when you get to social studies in the 5th grade, but you just put on those building blocks so that the people are able to understand, that they are a part and parcel of a country and of a greater global community, and to understand politics for what it really is, rather than something that seems to be, like that thing that I must get to later, or that thing that the political science graduates are involved in. We study its science, of course, going in depth like international relations, the origins of terrorism, but the basic understanding and definition of politics is really just, I guess, towards resource distribution, and this happens everywhere with power dynamics and whatnot, in schools, in corporate, outside of corporate, with politicians, in parliament, anywhere and everywhere else. But I think, to then answer your question more specifically, I think I've always been a bit inclined to political science from a very young age. I cannot quantify the age at the moment, but I have grown up. My dad is an avid reader, so I grew up, reading the biographies of Dr. Sem Nujoma, for example, where others wavered, the Mandelas, Siskin June. You'd go and ask, okay, what are we doing? We're singing Sarafina at school that day, and we are, but what is really happening? So I think from primary school, there has always been that inclination, that proclivity towards politics for me. Yeah.
When did you make politics your business? At what point did you realize that, Bandu, you need to take an active role in this?
I think to me it was a bit more different to Esther, and if I have to be completely honest, is when I felt the struggles of trying to provide for my family. I was a young father, a young person that was struggling to make a living. And then I found that it's important to raise my voice. Apart from that, I also studied political science, of course. And then and I studied at the University of Cape Town, and that time there was the Fees Must Fall protest. And students especially were very active in making things happen. And then I saw the effect of that and how powerful young people can actually be if they exercise their power within this democracy that we live. Ultimately, democracy means rule by the people, and it's important that we teach them how to exercise their power within this democracy. So then I realized, so by advocating for young people, that's how I was able to create an opportunity for myself. So yeah, that's when I made politics my business. But we were speaking about civic education, and I just want to make reference to something that we were speaking about earlier, just to add on what Esther was saying, that it's more than just teaching people about democracy and their place and how to contribute to development, but it's also about teaching people how to be ethical human beings, responsible human beings, because I think as a society we're losing our moral fabric. And from a young age, I agree that from pre-primary we have to teach young people these ethical values of respect, humility, integrity, and how to engage in a diplomatic manner. In a diplomatic manner. Because if we look at, for instance, on social media, we see young people, they're eager to make their voices heard. They're eager to speak about the challenges that they're facing on a day-to-day basis, but they don't know how to express themselves, or they don't know the channels, the appropriate channels to follow to make things happen in their favor. So what you see is they end up insulting and so on. It's because of this lack of citizenship education.
That brings us to my next question, and looking at the current education system. Would you say it's helping create responsible, considerate, and most importantly, humane beings?
Not necessarily.
Looking at what's happening, I mean, every time you buy a newspaper, every time you go on social media, you are inundated with all this bad news, as if nothing is ever going good in this country. It's gender-based violence, it's murder, it's crime. Where are we going wrong as far as the education system is concerned in playing that role of instilling these things that you have just mentioned in the young minds?
Pandey, going to take that?
So what I think basically where we're missing the point when it comes to education is currently we're teaching people how to memorize things. So the point of education isn't supposed to be to teach people what to think, but it's supposed to teach people how to think, how to use their minds creatively to improve the situations that they may live in. And I think that's where we're missing the point at the end of the day. And we're missing this value of moral education. And I don't mean religious education in a sense, but we live in a democracy and we have freedom of religion, freedom of consciousness and thought. So each one is allowed to believe in whoever they want to. But at the end of the day, we need to teach people moral values as well. And I think that's where we are going wrong at the end of the day.
I think really our current setup in the education system does not give a particular focus on training students and learners to be not only moral beings, because for some people they say morals are subjective, right? But just to generally be tolerant citizens, to be conscious thinkers. I think our current education system seems to be more catered and geared towards ensuring that people are like, okay, I'm going to do a BBA and then, I'm going to graduate and then I must get a job and whatnot. So it teaches, it feels more like a means to an end than it is about really inculcating a character within the citizenry. And I think I just wanted to point to the fact that education is very formative, right? That's why basic and secondary education is very important, because it forms the foundation and the basis on which somebody's character is built. When you go and then you branch out into law or chartered accountancy or economics or whatever it is that you're going to study, that is a specialized form of education. It's training and development. But the education that you receive at basic and secondary is kind of a holistic overview that teaches you just how to navigate life, which is precisely why it is at this level of education where you're then also supposed to include the citizenship education, because even if someone does not get the training and development which is offered at a tertiary institution, they're able to carry this formative knowledge that they've gained through the 0 to 12 years and still be able and are still supposed to be able to function in a normal society as a normal person and just relate to other people, properly without being weird and stuff. But I think that we are really failing in this regard, because from when I was in school, at least, you're taught the national anthem, you're taught who the founding father is. History gives you a brief of African history, brief of the world history, but you only get to really have an understanding of I only really came to understand what it means to be a Namibian when I did my own extensive research, because I was studying political science at the University of Namibia. So I think that in that regard, we're not doing enough. I don't think that civic education is even an integral part of our present curriculum as it stands, both the former and the reformed one. But I think something that we must also not overlook, and Jonas, I know you're looking at me like, I'll finish now. I think something that we are also overlooking perhaps is citizenship education through formal education only. I think if we can take a reference from our past just to help us be better architects of our future, is that a lot of our now liberation stalwarts, the consciousness that they had, the consciousness and the insight that they had to the surroundings around them, they got that through informal education, not necessarily through a textbook, but maybe through a teacher standing in front of them and saying, colleagues, there's apartheid here and you guys need to mobilize yourselves like this, or through meetings under a tree and so forth. So I think overall there seems to be a lack of that national duty, that patriotism among citizens, such that we're not even encouraging such engagements and interactions even beyond the school fence or beyond the school borders.
Right.